Hello. Welcome to Let's Become a Beloved Society, Conversations Illuminating Your Path to Wholeness. I'm here with my host, Mary Ardania, and this week we're going to start the discussion talking about what is being called the slap heard round the world. And the reason we're doing that is there is a lot to unpack in that few seconds of behavior that occurred. And because there's a lot to unpack, I believe one of the things that is of critical importance not to miss or overlook is what it means to be funny. And perhaps the universe is suggesting in this world observed event that it's time to reevaluate and reconsider what we as humans take to be funny. We're living in a world of oneness. Now, not everybody is in that world, but that is the world that is coming forward, that is gaining momentum, that is growing in number every day. People are waking up to the realization that we are all connected. Not only are we connected through social media and the day-to-day doings on this planet, but we're connected at a cellular level, at an energetic level, and ultimately we are all one. We are all made of the exact same material as everything else that you see in this 3D world. Everything looks the same under the microscope. So there is an interconnectivity here that I believe, and I think Mary agrees, that we're being given an opportunity to take a look at and perhaps grow and be more heart-based in our approach to humor. So before we get, and there are a lot of other things about this event that we'll talk about as well, but I'm going to go ahead and bring on the broadcast with us today a comedian from Southern California by the name of Gail Ochiltree. Some of you who live in Southern California may be aware of her comedic rise in the area, but she is a true comedian and well-studied, and we're going to go ahead and bring her on now. Here she is.
Hey, how you doing?
Welcome.
Thank you.
So in the broadcast, and first of all, I think even maybe before we get into the comedy, we should talk about the trauma. Because in my discussions with people and in what I've seen on the television interviews with various people, there was a trauma that a lot of people experienced in those moments that took place and in the processing of those moments afterwards. So for many people, for most people, I think, the mindset when you're watching the Academy Awards is here's a bunch of, Hollywood elites giving us a show and congratulating themselves for what they all think they did well. That's sort of my interpretation of the Academy Awards. These are all very rich and powerful people who can usually just do what they want in life and do, usually. And in the midst of this, the MC makes a joke about the wife of one of the award recipients in the audience. And what's interesting is everything was fine. Even while the joke was being made, the recipient of the award was laughing at the joke. And then something transpired. You could kind of see, I mean, that even the person who was the brunt of the joke, in the moment of the joke, didn't seem that upset in that moment. But then something happened in the two of them. Something happened between the two of them and in the two of them that made that joke suddenly not so funny and not acceptable. And everything was fine until the recipient of the award decided to get up and walk on stage and slap the MC. Nobody was expecting that. There wasn't a single person in the universe watching that show, I don't believe, that was expecting that response or that reaction. And so when things happen that we're not expecting, is the result that it results in trauma. Now, a lot of times things happen and we're not expecting it, and the trauma is very minimal and brief and meaningless, truly. But sometimes things happen and they take us over. Our response to what happened takes us over. And I want to talk about that for a minute because it's an important mechanism that a lot of people really either don't know about or have forgotten about. And you hear me talking about it all the time. It's the wiring of our housing. It's our body. It's not us, because we are infinite and not bound to this plane. We are not the housing. We use the housing while we're here. It's so we can be here. But in this case, the award recipient's housing took over. And he was not capable or present enough in himself, obviously, to stop it. And so that mechanism is one of the three F's, right? Freeze, flight, or fight. And so in this case, he didn't freeze in the moment. He might have frozen afterwards. We didn't see that. But what he did do was get up and fight. And he marched up on that stage and he slapped the MC, and then he marched away, shouting over his shoulder and shouting at the guy. None of this was considered behavior on that person's part, right? And I think it's really important to recognize that, because when people's bodies have taken over, they are not themselves. The housing is trying to solve some kind of a problem through an egoic measure, basically, of heroism. That's how the ego interpreted it. And so, psychologically, what we can see is that he went off to defend his wife, to stand, for her, because the joke was about her physical appearance. The offense was about her view, her look to the world, and being made ridiculed, made fun of on a world stage. Because even though the MC has a history of making jokes about this exact couple, this exact woman with a hair loss problem, he's been doing it apparently for, 8 years from the reports that I've heard or been told. So perhaps neither one of those people expected that joke to be made on this world stage the way it was. And so that's their trauma being acted out, right? Him going up there and slapping the MC and coming back. But what happened is now everybody else is traumatized. Everyone else. And each of us, and so I look at it and I go, well, now, what is happening here that we're all being given an opportunity to be in even in the slightest way traumatized by this event that took place? And what it tells us is that each of us is being asked to look within, to really evaluate ourselves in this response. And it's a great conversation piece because so many people had the experience, right? Millions, if not billions of people had the experience of watching that happen. And I know that there are people out there saying that it wasn't true, that it was fake or staged, or it really doesn't matter ultimately.
No.
So, and I want to just say the reason that I am not using people's names is that I want to keep this as neutral as possible in my discussions, and I want to hear from you ladies as well. In my discussions with people have been absolutely very firm in what they think and who they're not going to watch anymore, and who, just the responses have been so filled with judgment. It's taken me aback. And so I want to try and neutralize it a little just by leaving names out of it. We all know who they are. And anybody who's listening that doesn't know who they are can go look up who they are. Who they are is not the point. The point is, what is the meaning in this event for all of us? Because it could have happened to any group of people. This is an exchange that could happen, anywhere under other circumstances. So that's why I'm not using names.
I would like to say, you say this is an exchange that could have happened in any group of people under other circumstances. And on the one hand, that is true. But I think part of why it's so shocking is because this specific group of people
Right.
is all seen as like a group, the insiders. Right. It's not even like with politics, there's two different sides. It's like, I think that we view Hollywood as a sort of monolith. They're individuals, but it's like, oh, Hollywood, they're all on the same side. They're all the same elite. And so to see one of them slap another on the world stage was really very shocking.
Right.
Partly for that reason. The other thing, to me, like the initial reaction of the woman who was insulted, it was the typical, like, oh, this again, like the rolling of the eyes of this again is how it looked to me. And
right.
It kind of, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't even say this, but it kind of felt to me like, perhaps the husband who was laughing along with the joke, because that's what you're supposed to be, saw her look and then went, oh, I shouldn't be laughing along with this joke at her expense.
Right.
And then sort of overreacted to counteract, like, oops. Right. That's one reading of it. And I don't know that that's correct, but that's one reading that presented itself to me as to why he might have, what we might say, overreacted to this situation. Right. And the other thing is that thing of like comedy at the expense of people. I think it's gone on for a long time, this kind of mean humor. And, it's not edgy anymore. Like, I just want to tell all the comedians out there that the mean humor where you're like making fun of people's identities and who they are and how they look, there's a lot of jokes like that, the jokes about Take My Wife and the jokes about gay people and, used to be edgy. Lenny Bruce was edgy. And that was a long time ago. And that stuff's not edgy anymore. It's just old. And it's not funny. That's all. Okay. I'd love to hear what Gail has to say.
Okay, and hang on a second. So before Gail, I do want you to respond to this, but let me also, Nanette Kennedy is here and would like to join the stream. And Nanette is with Humanities Team, and they have a long history of promoting oneness and unity. And so it seems like a wonderful thing that she's here and would like to chime in. So Gail, go ahead. Welcome, Nanette.
Thank you. Thank you, Nanette. Thank you, Linda, for having me on the show today. A show, everything's a show for me, the broadcast, whatever we're calling it.
Right.
But
right.
As you know, I attended the Academy Awards the week prior to the broadcast because all of the special technical awards for animation and special effects are a separate show where we go over to the Academy and they screen them and stand out in the aisles and talk to us and point about the various aspects of that. I'm a Directors Guild member and I get screeners and I vote on these kind of things. So I do kind of have, I don't know all about what happened here. I do have an opinion about it, but I recorded it and watched it several times and rolled it back and looked at it again and again and said, did he double up his fist? Did he slap him? I was looking for legal aspects of this, what the heck went on here? But I was actually doing a show at the Comedy Chateau in North Hollywood at the time. And we've had many conversations about the difference between, vulgar humor, nasty, awful stuff. And if you don't know the difference, I feel like you shouldn't be on stage. Seriously. I mean, there's mean and spiteful, awful things where you're hurting someone's soul. That's the difference between joking about something in general, a conversation, maybe even. Here's where I cut. This is my line of demarcation with this. I might say, like, for instance, I did a joke the other night about the gay dog that was returned to the kennel in North Carolina. And then a gay couple, went and got that dog and took him home with them to take care of him because, how the heck do you know a dog's gay? There's no gay dog. They sniff around. That's what dogs do. You know what I mean? So I got up there and I said something about the gay dog, and I'm making a comment about gay population in general. And I said, well, I hear that he was a snappy dresser and he was a sham poodle, for crying out loud. And, I think the problem was that he was giving design floral advice to the lady of the house, and they knew he was gay, and they can't have that. We just can't have that. Now, I'm not making fun of an individual.
Right. Right.
I am making fun of a group that I love and am inclusive about. Right. And I think in the presentation and whatever, that's kind of known because I just showed it to you for that reason, not to perform it, not to whatever, but to zero in on the difference between meanness and vulgar. Now, if you're in the middle of a show and you look down at somebody and you make fun of their disability, you're hurting their soul. That's inexcusable. That's not okay. But we do handicap jokes all the time about somebody limping in on a crutch or this or that or the other because it's the human experience. It's not at the expense of someone. And for me, that's a huge, huge difference because I will not be party to doing something at the expense of hurting someone's soul. They're making them feel put down, lessening that, I just won't do it. Yeah. So what might have been a private moment at the Academy Awards where one guy goes up to the other and says, you're an asshole and you shouldn't have done that on TV. could have been done in private.
Right.
They diminished a woman's, on both of them did in their own way, took her choices away kind of to even stand up for herself, because now we got the guys, beating up, each other over a woman kind of thing.
And at the same time, let me just interrupt for a second. At the same time, I've heard that from a Black woman's perspective, seeing a Black man stand up and defend his woman was heartwarming. Because in that culture, what Black women experience quite often is that their men are not standing up for them or protecting them or, being in allegiance with them. So I thought that was an interesting perspective as well.
Yes, I understand. I hear that. I think the comedian's take on it is, from what I hear, because I'm in that comedy, I'm in a comedy club 4 or 5 times a week. So the conversation has been in their comedy and up there making comments on this, hundreds of them, is that what's next? Is somebody going to now be able to come in with a gun and shoot somebody? Are they going to walk in with other weapons? What is next? When this can happen at the Academy Awards, what is that? Are we safe?
That's an interesting perspective as well, because I think if you were not a comedian, you probably haven't thought of that. I hadn't thought of that, but that is that's a valid concern as well. And then now we get to the point where the Academy didn't really handle it well.
They are now.
Well, the thing is that it's how you handle it in the moment. So
the police were waiting. The police were waiting to haul him out, but they were going, oh, money or discipline.
Right. And Chris didn't want him removed. Chris didn't want him, well, there, I've said his name. We all know that. But, the MC didn't want him removed, the person who got slapped. And so let's shift for a minute and let's talk about, because there hasn't been a lot of talk about this either, how he responded, how the MC responded, because that could have been a fist fight.
Right.
If both of them had chosen to respond from ego, if the MC's body had decided, hey, you can't come up here on a world stage and slap me, I'm gonna cold cock you back. But he didn't.
It's really kind of interesting to me, because what I was just thinking about right now was like, old paradigm, new paradigm. Linda, that's a place I'm often sort of looking at.
Right.
So like the joke, old paradigm. The response, old paradigm. Jokes about that mean joke about that hurt someone's soul, as you said. And I really like that way of delineating what it is, because that's perfect, And then the man having to stand up for his woman, definitely old paradigm, through violence. Like a man standing up for his woman, maybe not through violence, might be a little bit less old paradigm. It's still old paradigm, but it's kind of like, let's call it transitional. But like, I gotta go hit this guy. Definitely old paradigm. But then the MC's response, that's
new
where
paradigm
consciousness coming in and going, oh, this is going to a place I really didn't foresee, and I'm just going to stop it now. And that's what he did.
Yep.
I mean, his response was really perfect. It was like, okay, okay, you go over there, I'll go over here,
And even to this day, his response has been perfect, because he was, at a broadcast this weekend, and
in Boston, I think.
Yeah, or not a broadcast, but a performance this weekend, and someone asked, about what happened, and he basically said, I'm still processing, which is another new paradigm response. Right? The fact that he's processing.
Absolutely.
considering all that happened, and not just rushing out and speaking, whatever comes to mind right there in the moment.
I see a note from one of your people there that says that the MC didn't know about the medical condition. Actually, I mean, thank you for the comment, but from my understanding, she has spoken about this at length in public, and
and he's been making jokes about it since 2016 too.
So yeah, I'm just
Lynette, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts?
Didn't she hear?
I don't know.
Are you muted, Nanette? Or is it like me that first week when we couldn't hear him? Well, no, Linda just couldn't hear me.
Maybe she's muted.
Yeah, I don't
maybe go out and come back in.
That'll do it sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that might do it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's go back to this comment for a minute. So what if the MC had been unaware? I think the answer is that as Mary was saying, and I do love the term old paradigm, new paradigm, because that is the shift that we're in. The shift that's happening here on Earth is we're moving from a individual me kind of world into a we world, where humanity is more cognizant of our connection to each other and to the planet and to everything around us. So old paradigm, new paradigm, the joke resides in the old paradigm structure. It's a joke at the expense of someone else. And so even if he didn't know she had a condition, but actually we know that he did, but even if he didn't know, it still falls into the category of a joke that hurts the soul. And, an attacking joke against somebody, against how they look. Right. And so I'm not a fan of that kind of humor. I don't really know the MC or his material well, because most of his humor is in that realm.
The Julio Iglesias Jr., that person, that MC that we're not saying his name, it's very difficult not to. But he has done that to other people and ruined careers. So I'm not real thrilled about supporting the current situation, because it's almost like, well, so just throwing that out.
Right. Amber is here as well on YouTube, it looks like. Welcome, Amber. I apologize for the late acknowledgement. If you can see, there's a ticker tape running across the bottom that's got the studio phone and the email and Zoom meeting numbers. And I neglected to flip back off that screen to the comments. So I'm glad I got back over there. Glad to have you here, and feel free to chime in at any point.
I have a thought that we kind of covered, if you don't mind, if you weren't revved up to say something there.
No, go right ahead.
I think it's good for the audience to know that I do military comedy and that I was in the military, because we talked a little bit about a hero. One of the gentlemen involved that did the slapping was commenting in his speech subsequently to that incident that he had done a film about defending family. I just looked at it and went, oh, wow. Do we forgive somebody in the moment for something that, he wouldn't have normally done had he not been so psychologically wrapped up in this role of, the Williams family, and him defending his daughters and being so stridently, carried back? Or is that just not acceptable? Where I've done stuff in the moment that's just so damn dumb, I can't even, why did I do that? Not recently, because I'm old now. But, in my past, in my past, I I admit to it, and that's why I'm in therapy now. But that's, hey, so the comment, I can't remember which one of you, whether it was Mary or Linda, about hero. What was it that we said about that? And I just wrote a note, military hero. See, the things that we do in the military do not translate quite often into civilian life.
Right.
And so my attitude about being a hero is about doing things for other people, being part of a community, doing right things, not going around and beating people up, even though it feels like because of our PTSD or whatever else that we may want to do that.
Right.
But it's not okay.
Right.
It's a problem.
Right.
There's a couple of comments here that I want to acknowledge as well. So one person said, I'm not sure violence is an adequate answer or response to the joke. And I think that that's really where it all comes down to, right? What happened, regardless of the role that someone might have been playing that led him to be more inclined to react this way. That's a horrible excuse, I think.
Agreed.
To me, and I have a background in theater and production.
They're nuts.
If you can't keep the role you're playing separate from your life, God help us all. Right? Because that really, that's a problem. It
is a problem. And seriously, that makes me think of Heath Ledger every time.
Right.
It's like, I totally blame that movie for him dying, that Joker role.
Right.
So,
I
think
and
we
James
all
Dean
know,
as well.
Yeah.
Right.
We all know, you gotta keep your grasp on reality.
Right. Keep one foot here, centered and grounded anyway.
I turn it off. When I get off stage, I click it off. I don't need to be a comedian in actual life. I might say something funny to you because we're working on this, but no.
Right.
Turn it off.
Exactly.
Right. So violence is really never the solution to anything.
That's how I feel too.
And a lot of people were upset with that evening for what they think children witnessed. And how do you explain this, for example, to children who might watch movies of the guy that won the award? How do you explain that? How do you rationalize it to make it acceptable?
You don't.
It's
how you explain that, it's a teaching moment. How you explain that, you don't rationalize it. It's like what Gail was saying and what someone else I saw post on Facebook, the important thing is we're all human. We have all messed up. I've done some dumb things. And fortunately, I did not do them on a telecast in front of millions of people, And most of them were done in the days before Facebook was a thing. Yay. And cell phones didn't exist. So they've all gone into the ether and they're gone. And I learn from those things. So for a child, you teach them, like Linda's talking about the housing, you know, in the moment, this person had an outsized reaction and did something that he shouldn't have. But also, I've been sitting here saying to people, like, didn't you learn on the playground not to make mean jokes about other people? I did. Do they not teach that anymore? I mean, and then we had that president, but it's like that I was taught was unacceptable.
Right.
So if we
Right.
teach our children that making those kind of jokes, like that humor is not funny. So it was two wrongs did not add up to a right. They added up to the slap heard around the world. And we can all learn from that how we don't want to be. And we can teach our children how not to behave. You know, that's how I think you do it. You teach them, this guy made a mean joke that wasn't good. This guy overreacted by slapping him. Also not good. Neither of these are examples you want to follow. The only thing you might want to follow is the way the first guy who made the joke didn't fuel the fire after that. He didn't pick it up and keep going. You know, that's the only positive example in any of that.
Right.
Here's Nanette back. Maybe we'll be able to hear her. No.
Huh. All right. She's still having audio issues. We may not do any more Zooms. I'm not going to share what just happened on Zoom, but we may not be doing any more Zooms. At least not without a password or some other.
No, not that.
Oh, yeah. It was great.
I think a comedian who is on stage is dynamically, the relationship is, it's kind of a power position because you have the microphone.
Right.
True.
And that's a handy thing when the audience talks crap, you know, and you have to put them in their place because they're drunk or whatever. That's different from what we're talking about. And if you use that microphone to put somebody in a victim position,
right,
like hurting their soul, I object highly. That's all.
Right.
I don't even know how to further describe that. I just,
Yeah.
I object at the time. I talk to the comedian about it. And if it happens to anyone in the audience, I go and talk to them and apologize and say, I'm sorry, that'll never happen at one of my shows, kind of thing. I just do.
Right.
Because I don't want them to leave and feel bad for days because they came to a comedy show. You know what I mean?
Right.
And see, that's awesome. To me, that's new paradigm behavior. You know, you're looking at that and going, this does not work. And what can I, as an individual here witnessing this, do to make it better going forward? So I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Amber makes a couple of comments. I think the sooner you can forgive, the better for you. And everyone makes mistakes. I'm grateful I'm not famous. And that, you know, both of these certainly, so again, this is sort of an old paradigm, new paradigm thing as well. In the old paradigm, forgiveness is something, it's a process that's really the best thing for your health, right? In the new paradigm, you start out in a place where you're integrated with oneness, and the mechanism forgiveness doesn't even need to be applied because there can never be anything wrong. Everything is in its divine purpose and function. That doesn't mean everything's going to be pleasant or wonderful or enjoyable, but you understand that there isn't anything else, right? Divinity is all there is. And what we're seeing are 3D manifestations that are a result of divine energy. So life is always in a state of perfection, whether we like it or not, and whether we understand it or not. And so at that point, the mechanism of forgiveness is no longer necessary because you never reach a place of needing to forgive. Everything is already, in essence, forgiven in advance. And when we're dealing with ourselves, that's a wonderful place to be. Because one of the things that happens to many of us, most of us, I think, is that we're taught to beat ourselves up for how we are, from the very young ages. We're in some way told we're inadequate and not good enough, and we take those things in when we're little and we internalize them, and then those feelings and thoughts can influence us for the rest of our lives. So much better to try and integrate that we're each divinity, and we may make mistakes. That's fine. There's no need to beat ourselves up about it, though. So we've lost Mary. I don't quite sure what happened with that.
Nanette made a comment in the chat. Could I comment on that?
Sure, absolutely.
She mentioned that she said, I was going to say that I heard Jerry Seinfeld, he made a joke about Jerry Lewis's death on the day that Jerry Lewis died. And he was not on stage, but a fellow comedian said, oh, Jerry, that's too soon, because there is a code of ethics. Well, we would like there to be. These people in their mouths, I swear. There should be a code of ethics for the most part. Now, I want to make just quote something that goes on. Betty White passed away, and people talk about her on stage regularly, and they say that she was just, a couple of weeks short of her 100th birthday. And they said, what an effing quitter, because she didn't make it to 100 years. Now, everybody laughs at that. And they said that she was up in heaven hosting for Bob Saget. And it was a regular thing. She's not here, and her soul isn't being hurt. It's like acknowledgement of what a nice person she is. It wasn't in a nasty manner. So the difference between somebody commenting about someone the day of their death is just personally promotional to get attention. That's what that is right there, in my opinion. Versus commenting on Betty White, who we all love and adore, and just calling her, well, what a quitter. She couldn't make it to 100 years old. I mean, that's not too soon. That's somebody that we're still idolizing and stuff. And it's just a very different kind of comment.
Yeah.
So just wanted to bring Nanette's comment in because it's a good one.
Yeah.
I agree with it.
I was watching Frasier the other night, and I yearn for shows like that can make you just laugh out loud. And here I see in the private chat. Yeah, I didn't.
Golden Girls.
Thank you. Yeah. And the other night, it was the episode where it's fairly early on in the series. I think it's in season 2. And Daphne had borrowed a book that Frasier was reading or needed. I think he was going to talk about it on his radio show. For some reason, he needed it. And she had borrowed it. So he figured it must be in her bedroom. And it's really inappropriate for him to do what he did. But again, we are all human. And so when we choose to make silly mistakes, that can be funny. And in this case, what happened was he gets in there, he finds the book, and he starts to leave. And then he actually, he realizes, ooh, she's really, got this room decorated nicely. And he starts to kind of just take in where he is. And then, he happens to see a bottle of pills on her dresser, and curiosity, because we are curious, takes over, and he picks the bottle up and he's looking at it just as he hears her coming in the room. So instead of putting it back down, which she would see, what does he do? But he slips it into his pocket. So then, of course, he's got to find a time to sneak back into the room, and there's a big brouhaha about him being in a room. So then he has to sneak back into the room to put the bottle back, which he does and gets caught, and it's another brouhaha. And then the next day, for some reason, I don't even remember, he ends up back in there again. Then Niles comes to find him, and he's in there. And then the dad comes, and he's in there, and they're all like tripping over each other and knocking stuff off the bed and trying to put things back. And she walks in, and I mean, it is hilarious. It's not really at anybody's expense. No. It's just about people being human. And yeah, they're not necessarily being honest, and they're not necessarily being respectful of her space, but these are all natural human things that we do, and situations that we get ourselves into, and they can be hilariously funny. I was just about rolling on the floor, and I've seen this episode before, but it is just so well done.
Well, a lot of that show, it's like you're saying, they're laughing at themselves, or we're laughing at them laughing at themselves.
Right.
It's that thing of how we as humans can all be dopes sometimes.
Right.
And I like, personally, I enjoy laughing at my antics, and the worst embarrassing things I do, I turn them into funny anecdotes to amuse other people as much as possible, because that helps me too, and that kind of humor is like, it's not at anybody's expense. It's at all of our expense, at the human condition, sort of, we're all kind of silly.
There's another thing too that I think I'm trying to be reasonably cautious about, and it's generational humor.
Right.
Yeah.
There are just things that aren't funny to World War II people that are hysterical to Vietnam people.
Right.
I'm saying, putting that in there because that's kind of the why.
Sure.
Yeah.
And millennials are idiots. So, I mean, I just constantly beat up on them, because, I say, well, millennials, this is a telephone, and this is and you hang it up like this on the thing, you don't have a brick on you.
Dial it. Yeah. And then that's going, dial the phone. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, and it's okay because, the other day they started talking about cryptocurrency and assumed that they were leaving everybody in the dust. And I said, well, if you want to talk about smart contracts, blockchain finance, and liquidity pools and validators for cryptocurrency, I am the Walter White of the cryptocurrency world, And I said, and by the way, have any of you even seen Breaking Bad? I mean, they were like born yesterday,
Right.
And so there's them, and there's World War II, and there's what people think are funny for any given reason. Like, we don't think really that 9/11 jokes are funny.
No.
Most of the time. That doesn't really work. But for somebody who is unaware of it, wasn't around at the time, they think that that's historical stuff that they want to, tell jokes about. And it usually just pisses everybody off. So if you don't mind, I want to show this book before, we go too far.
Please. Right.
Because this book is, the name of it is, I don't know, do I have it there?
Yeah.
Laughter. And it was written in 1902. And this man won a Nobel Prize for his psychological philosophy of laughter and what makes people laugh. Now, I read a lot. This is called a book for the millennials who are watching. Actual paper, and and this is called highlighting. And you hold it like this, and you kind of sit there and dog ear the pages and write in the margins. It's a lovely experience.
You dog ear
Anyway.
the pages and write in the margins and all that
Amazing,
highlighter.
huh?
Ah!
So I started reading this, and Bergson is that Canadian name, I guess, and it's a translation. And so I have to read it and then stop and think about what he was referring to. But he talks about fun things like repetitive gestures and, and different things that people notice and laugh. Now, and I think to myself, well, now maybe in 1902 they'd laugh at that crap, but I don't know that a drunk audience in Hollywood's going to deal with that very well. So I have to, but
Right.
it's about the philosophy of what makes people, because what did the cavemen do? They didn't have language yet, so they were laughing about things. How? I mean, I just think about these things, so I just wanted to throw that out there.
Right.
Generational.
Right. And also situational. I have a really hard time watching America's Home Videos because like 90% of them are people hurting themselves.
Yeah.
And although, it can look funny, if you really are from a place of oneness, it's as if it's happening to yourself, and that no longer makes it funny.
Banana peel humor, we call it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, humor really relies on a shared set of values about what's funny. I mean, that kind of goes, it's obvious, but we don't really think about it that much sometimes.
Right.
And that's kind of when we talk about the new paradigm, old paradigm stuff, banana peel humor is old paradigm. And I think also let's talk about how sometimes we laugh at things less because they're funny and kind of because it's a nervous reaction,
Shock humor.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So a lot of times, we even sort of know that things aren't really funny, but we don't know how to react, right?
Right.
So we laugh because what else are we going to do? I used to have this teacher. It was when I was very young, and it was what did they call it? Catechism. Like I was in a public school, but I had to go to catechism classes to learn, religious stuff. And she was very young. She probably was maybe 20 or something. I can see now I was about 13 at the time. And the kids, liked to give her a hard time. And she laughed. And I know it's because she would get angry or she would be hurt. She would want to cry, but she just laughed all the time because, she had to do something to diffuse the tension.
I nervous laugh a lot, but I also will laugh. I will find myself laughing at some of the what may be offensive to other people, and it's like well, I laughed when Don Young died, right? He was 88, which is a power number, and then he was the 49th. He worked for 49 years as a senator for the 49th state. And I look at that and it makes me laugh. It's like the invisible hand of the universe making these things happen. I don't look at it as it's coincidence. To me, nothing is a coincidence. And so when I see these things happening, I have to laugh. The timing of certain things it is funny to me.
Well, one more thing. I think a lot of this bad jokes and everything come as a result of, being perfunctory or ill-planned about your set.
Right.
Just being so random that you say stupid crap up there trying to think up stuff on the fly, and it just isn't right.
Right.
We always try to work in what our personal flaws are And I don't think people do that. I think they look outward for other people's flaws.
Right.
And then we
Yeah.
have a blind spot to consider, an agenda to consider in our comedy sets, and an attitude to consider. And
Right.
that's what makes somebody truly a comedian and not just a joke teller and not just a boy, I have to really control myself here with the language, and not just somebody tossing crap out in the room. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
You know, and I think that if people truly tried to be professional about their comedy, it would be funnier, it would be more uplifting, it would be more intelligent, and that's just where I stand as a comedian. I work hard to do that. I spent the last week watching over 250 comedians perform, and I looked to see what is their flaw, what is their blind spot, what is their agenda, and what is their attitude, so I could more understand if they were hitting the mark or not. Is it that work for me? Is that the kind of comedian I want to be? Are they a role model for me to do better, be better?
Right.
And so that's all I have to say on that. But there is a formula of what people really should consider in order to even be on stage. It isn't as random and fun and he. It actually takes some skill, thought, and talent.
Goes into it. Yeah, a lot goes into it.
Yes.
We've got about 4 minutes left, and so I wanted to just wrap up. No worries with some final thoughts. I'm going to go out on a limb and suggest that even humor directed towards groups is probably something that is old paradigm humor, and that really what's being birthed here, and we're on the cutting edge of it, right? We're right at the beginning of it, but I believe we're at the cutting edge of shifting what we put forth as funny and what we look for as what's funny. And I think that's one of the big takeaways from this this slap heard round the world and seen round the world is evaluating, people reevaluating, is it appropriate? Is it? And I understand the heart with which, Gail, that you've chosen to direct more towards your humor in some cases more towards, groups, handicapped people, or the military. And in the military, you came from that, and I feel like you're allowed to, anybody who's lived it and breathed it is allowed to joke about it, right? You have that experience.
Well, that and the Catholics.
Right.
Child abuse humor, it just comes into my head when we talk about that group, but not all groups. I mean,
yeah. But see, and I think those are levels where that probably all is old paradigm. And I think as moving forward, I'm curious to see where you take it. And I'm curious to see what happens in the world. We didn't get to some of the other aspects of it, but I don't think we're going to come back and talk about this more unless there's a real need to. And we did have a couple of other questions that got submitted, so we'll carry those over till next week. Any final thoughts there, Mary or Ninette? Are you putting anything in the chat?
Well, the final thought that I've been having was this Schadenfreude thing. And I never understood Schadenfreude, which is laughing at the misfortunes of others, which is kind of like what you're talking about with the funniest home videos, until the election of a certain recent ex-president. And then I really started understanding why sometimes, when you were talking, Linda, about laughing at Don King is when I thought of it. Sometimes when people have been really painful to me, I have had that tendency, like the first time I remember laughing at someone's misfortune was one of those rabid gun people who had his gun in his pants and then accidentally shot himself. So I didn't understand that for like decades and decades of life. And then, so anyway, it's kind of like I shouldn't throw that out there at the last 2 minutes because it's kind of a big topic, but I felt the need to mention it since it came up.
Understood. Nanette, let's see. Nanette says, I wanted to talk. We'll have to see what the issue is. I can learn sign language over the coming week. I'd rather my mic worked. Yeah, I wish your mic had worked as well, Nanette.
Yeah, so bizarre.
This is weird with a W. A flying W is weird. And this is, what do you think? Those are horns, and this is bull. Bull.
That's my guess.
All right, ladies. Well, it's straight up the hour. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. And thank you for those in the audience. If you're listening to the podcast after the fact, remember you can join the conversation at any time live during the audio broadcast at 907-351-3003. You can also text or call that number at any time. You can email your questions to questions@walkingthroughyourwalls.com. And we're going to reevaluate whether we're going to broadcast on Zoom or if we're going to change the meeting ID and perhaps add a password or something. So stand by for that. You should be able to find this on pretty much every podcast channel there is. And we do have listener support implemented. So if you'd like to help out that way, we'd appreciate it. Thank you to Nanette Kennedy and Gail Ochiltree for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was nice having
week.
Guests.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Later.